This is the Seahawkers podcast, live and uncatfished. I'm Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by my good buddy Adam Emmert as the Seahawks close out their 2023 campaign with a 21-20 victory over the stupid Arizona Cardinals. Unfortunately, Adam, it is closing the season with a win, and not a loss is is customary in the playoffs if you don't go to the Super Bowl and win. But we have the stupid Bears to also thank for that.
I guess. I mean, I have this team to thank for that by losing the way that they did to the Steelers. So no blame for the Bears. Last year
or the Rams or the Bengals. There were plenty of opportunities.
100%. And last year we get the lucky break and we get in the playoffs with the Lions win. This year, it's the way the ball bounces. If you're gonna play it that close to the vest and leave it in other people's hands, I mean, you kind of get what the way the ball bounces. It's just how it goes. It's you get what you get. But Brandon, is it better to win or is it better to lose?
Ooh, I don't know. We could have used those 3 picks of draft position that they would have gotten if they would have lost, I suppose, which I went and looked at the draft value chart, and is the exact amount is about a 3rd round comp pick. So if you want to be mad about losing a 3rd round comp pick and not getting the win, I like to finish the season with a win. I like having a winning record. They can still make changes despite whatever their record is. I don't think an 8-9 team versus a 9-8 team is going to change the trajectory of the offseason necessarily. But for me, I'm always more happy when we win instead of lose. But we're in this weird space because here we are celebrating a win in some way, but also it's the end of the season, which is also not so much fun.
Yeah, for sure. And while the results of today were about technically the worst case scenario in terms of the draft position and then not getting into the playoffs. So, you kind of get the worst of both worlds there. It's also a benefit because I do believe what Clinton had to say a few weeks back on one of the shows. I think it was What If. And he was saying that, if you start rooting for losing and you start playing for losing, it turns into losing mentality. And that is a very slippery slope. So
right.
Could
you imagine if Pete went out there and it made for an interesting choice to the end of the game, and I do want to get to a lot of the folks who are in chat here today too, but there are a lot of components to talk about in this game. And sure. Pete had that decision late in the game, right? When they get the touchdown, a nice touchdown in the back of the end zone to Tyler Lockett. What was that? I'm already losing what set up then, because it was a 2-point conversion to Tyler that pulled him ahead. But it was they had the opportunity to go for 1, go for 2 with 2 minutes left, and Pete made the correct choice of going for 2 and not leaving any kind of overtime options in play for the end of the game. Thank goodness. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, and I hope that's a mark for things to come next season, and Pete finding the aggressiveness that he had earlier on with his Seahawks tenure, because I do feel like it's gotten slightly more conservative over the time. We don't see the John Ryan fake punts anymore. We don't see some of those ballsy onside kicks or 4th down go for it's in really critical situations. And defensively, I think they need to go for it a little bit more as well, not just in the draft and all that stuff, but also just in play calling, because one of the things we saw today in the Cardinals game is they attacked the soft zones when they did throw the ball. And, that sort of passive play everything in front of you type coverage, which, to be fair, the entire league is doing.
Oh, yeah.
It drives me nuts.
There are different ways that you could play that, though. And I feel like sometimes the Seahawks play it in some of the softest ways imaginable. But we've got our live executive producer, Ryan911, in with a $9.99 super chat. Thanks for all these live shows this year. It's been a ton of fun. Idea for the off season: Adam should do Sasquatch hunting vids.
Ooh, well, thank you for all of the support as the live executive producer this year, Ryan. That's been amazing and super appreciated. The funny part is it probably shouldn't be me. It should be my neighbor, Brandon. He has a wild Sasquatch story that I 1000% believe. And he told it on a podcast. I can't remember which one, but I can ask him if anybody's interested. He's the one with the real experience. My one Sasquatch experience was not all that exciting, and I don't even know if that was that for sure. So one thing I do know for sure is James Conner still ran the ball real well throughout this game, and we saw that pop up again in the second half after playing pretty well in the first half against the run.
Yeah, the run game that did not get fixed. They had their moments, but overall, again, a terrible effort stopping the run defensively. Not a terrible effort from Samuel Gelber, who is in with the 21-20 score super chat. It was going to be $6.66 if Prater makes that kick. Good to the end of the season with the win. To be true contenders this year, this team would have to be a completely different team than the one we watched all year. And I suppose that's some of the solace that you get from not making it into the playoffs, because realistically, yes, this team would not have the ability to go deep into the playoffs, but there's always that hope that maybe you can, maybe things fall your way and you can get an upset and you can beat one of those stupid division teams and get a little bit of vengeance.
Catch a wave, that sort of thing. If you make the playoffs, maybe you win a game
or
two.
Maybe you're the New York Giants and you go and you beat the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl. That stuff can happen, but we don't have the Giants defensive line. I know.
And we don't have the opportunity to do any of that because we left it in the fate of somebody else's hands. And, it's funny, as Sam says, it's got to be a completely different team. And I think that's where some of us differ in our fandoms here, whether or not we need it to be completely different, or if there's certain areas that need to be cleaned up and there's some real gems that we can save and build on. And I'm in the latter camp. I definitely understand the mentality of the people in the prior camp. I just happen to disagree. And I think this offseason, one of the things that we need to do as fans, as we talk about this, is we really do need to remember that much like in real life, when we get into politics and all that crap, we're all striving for the same goals. We want the best thing possible.
We all want the Seahawks to be great.
Right. Some of us just have different visions of how we should get there. And the reason why I'm kind of where I'm at is because Pete and John are under contract till 25. And I don't see a ownership group that is going to be looking to sell at some point to be paying two coaches, one they fired and one they hired, as they're trying to sell the team. I just don't think that that's where they are financially speaking.
Yeah.
And then we can get into the merit of that in terms of Pete Carroll's ability and job and all that all through the offseason. That's fine. But in this game, we did see some really cool stuff out of this team, including Gino with another stat. He played a very solid game, and just kind of fitting that the last TD goes to Tyler this year, one of the all-time Seahawks.
Yeah, 34-yard touchdown to Tyler Lockett. We saw the stat during the game that he didn't have any 40-yard receptions this year although he had led the league, I guess, in the previous 8 seasons. But we had to settle for a couple 30-yard catches from Lockett in this game on his way to, just 2 catches, 71 yards, that 1 touchdown. He also had the catch I guess catches for 2-point conversions don't count in the stat sheets. That's something I just learned after 10 years of podcasting. All right, we've got Gornish Slick coming in with 2 Canadian, finished with a win. See, Gornish is already looking ahead to 3-3 out this week, finished with a win, so we can start with an in.
Yep, absolutely. And that'll be fun. I look forward to listening to you guys on that. Actually, on my mill trip, I actually listened to all of our shows for the week. I never listen to our stuff because it feels a little narcissistic and I just don't like doing it. I have to give all you guys credit, man. You guys put out amazing stuff and it was really fun. I found myself laughing out loud many times throughout my trip. So
you can listen to the stuff that you're not on and it doesn't have to be weird.
It's part of our product. I don't know. It's probably a me problem. You're right.
It probably is. Carly coming in with a $4.99 super chat. Our draft pick is worse than it could have been with an L. But God, that touchdown and 2-pointer for Lockett made me so happy. I'm glad we won in a Seahawky way. Thanks, Carly.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what this 14-year run under Pete Carroll has looked like in terms of how games seemingly go. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. And they happen to come out on top this time in dramatic fashion. That was a lot of fun.
Kimchi coming in with a $4.99 super chat. The Hawks are officially out, but let's hope the Huskies can get it done. Go Dogs. Yes, and in terms of college fandom, Montana Grizzlies did not get the job done. I didn't look at the final score. I just know that
My
by the
fault.
time the Seahawks,
Totally my fault.
It was
all my fault.
It was my fault for it being your fault. I shoot to Adam a text saying, "Hey, are you watching the Grizz game?" Because at this point it was close. It was 7-3. Jackrabbit's a good team. And then as soon as Adam turns on the TV, what happens?
The floodgates opened and my beloved Grizzlies lost. So that's fine. So yes, go Dogs, man. Like that would be the one thing to come out of this weekend, or this little set of sporting events here that would be great for Seattle. So rooting for them for sure.
We've got Amy Holmes in the chat with the $4.99 super chat. Thanks for hanging in with us this whole crazy year. Big thanks to Amy. Amy always coming in during the shows, hanging out in the Discord with us. Really appreciate everything you do, Amy.
Heck yeah, for sure. Appreciate all you guys for hanging in with us this year. It was a roller coaster year. We can all talk about the different things that need to be done, what didn't happen, all that stuff throughout the off season. But one thing we can all agree on about this season is it wasn't boring.
No, two things we can agree on. One, it wasn't boring, and the run defense was ultimately terrible throughout the ever since week 5.
Yeah.
Dan J with a $9.99 poundage. Epic content this whole year, guys. Great to have a winning record. Next year is the one. Who should be the next DC?
Who should be the next DC? I haven't started doing the deep dive on those things, but of all the things, because I kind of expressed how I feel like I don't think Pete will be going this year. I do think they'll make a change at defensive coordinator. Maybe they won't. Pete's extremely loyal too, but if they were, I would hope that they would bring in somebody with their own experience as a coach rather than hiring from within. And I think that would be awesome. So the one thing that is, you can look at the statistics and really point to is that Ken Norton, a little up and down, mostly up though. If you actually look at the way they finish defensively each and every year, tackling was usually at the top. Under Clint Hurt, it's been dreadful both years.
And the tackling part of it is, I think, the part that's tough to stomach the most, because it seems like one of the most fundamental parts of the game, particularly on defense. Mm-hmm. And so, gosh, when you see moments in this game where they're hitting guys in the backfield, or Darrell Taylor had moments in this game of goodness, but gosh, there was one time where he was in the backfield untouched along with James Conner, and you see Darrell Taylor swiping at the football, and then Conner ends up picking up like 8 yards. And it's moments like that where you're like, dude, instead of going for the football, square the guy up. You can go for his legs if you need to, if you don't want to go up high, and just get the dude on the ground. You get a tackle for a loss. Like, enjoy that part of the stat before you worry about the fumble part of it. And it was kind of a bummer that they didn't have any of those turnovers. But I point out Darrell Taylor, and it's not exclusively to him either.
It's not. And you saw the tackling up and down all day today. Then there was the one tackle by Spoon on James Conner where he went full WWE on him. That was right. That was super fun. And I saw somebody in the Discord mention that we just need to clone 10 more Spoons.
That's all.
I'm fine with that. Somebody also suggested maybe a couple new B-Wags, a younger version of that. And the GoFundMe will start shortly, and we'll find some crazy ex-German scientists to make it happen.
Nick Nill in here saying, it's weird, as trouble as our defense has been, the D provided our only Pro Bowl players. And we saw the aforementioned Devin Witherspoon get a selection. We saw Bobby Wagner get selected for, it may be, I feel like some of these awards are career awards at this point when it comes to the Pro Bowl, but Bobby obviously leading the NFL in tackles, so it's not like it's not deserving. And we saw Julian Love get in as well. And I think part of that in both for his defensive and his special teams play.
Oh, for sure. And while a little bit of an up and down season, especially early for Julian Love, he really did settle in for the second half and was obviously one of our better defensive players. So good signing there. And that hedge against the idea that maybe Jamal couldn't come back and be the Jamal of the Jets or the first couple games with the Seahawks paid dividends. And that was one of John Schneider's better moves over the offseason. A lot of what we saw this season, though, Brandon, was entirely predictable because of John Schneider's moves in the offseason. And that's kind of where the rub is. Like, a lot of people want to get rid of Pete. I'm more pissed at John. This token effort to shore up the front seven of the defense.
Yeah.
It was unacceptable. I was mad about it then. I told you this was going to happen if you don't take care of this. And here we are now.
You do wonder if it's part of a longer term plan, or if they really thought that going after Draymond Jones was the plan, and Jamal Adams, coming back. Well, obviously they had a plan in place if Jamal didn't come back healthy, because that was the Julian Love pick. And yeah, they did not do enough in the trenches. They did make some moves in the trenches, but it wasn't enough, and they could have built that through the draft as well. It'll be interesting to see if they learn from that strategy from this last offseason, or if it was part of the plan to do that in this offseason with this draft. That, without sitting them down and getting the truth out of them, I suppose we'll never know. But I did want to talk about here what Phil has to say, protector from What If, on part of our network of shows. Geno and the wide receivers won over half our games. That seems like a true fact. Get that man a mediocre defense, and we'll win the NFC West next year. There's some tough components of the NFC West, but it does. I mean, it kind of feels like we're at the same spot as last year, right? Where we say, hey, all the defense does is have to improve to mediocre. And instead of improving, they did not improve.
Yeah. I mean, they were a little better in the passing game. I think we could agree on that. But in the run game, yes, it was more of the same and predictably slow. I would have been fine with bringing in Mario Edwards and Jaron Reed and then making a midseason move for Leo if you had two more highly drafted defensive tackles in there to get them some experience and get this thing rolling. The problem is that the way that they went about it this year is it left you about too deep in the interior, and you can't win a lot of games doing that. And as you can see, Ollie agrees with his tail, but yeah, I would have much rather seen them gone a different direction there. And the only acceptable answer, and the reason I'm willing to give this another roll of the dice, is that we are in the middle of a 3-year rebuild. This is year 2, and maybe the order of operations is addressing that this year. And if they go about it in a real way, I'll be pretty stoked. If they don't, yeah, I could find myself on the other side of the argument here. I think.
We've got Sam Kirk coming in. The Vic Fangio defense experiment is over. It's easy to feel that way when you look around the league and you see some of the offshoots of the Fangio defense not having the same kind of success as the man himself. Sometimes one guy can coach it, but I suppose can't quite teach it to the others. And that might be the situation that we're in with the Seahawks defense.
Yeah. And I was pounding the table. I was like, if you're going to run the Vic Fangio defense, and bring in Vic Fangio. And people said, well, you can't do that. He'll never be a defensive coordinator. And what does he do in Miami?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
he's
Miami was,
coordinator.
And he did fine for the most part,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of his disciples haven't had nearly as much success as he has with his system. So, I mean, if you're going to go that way, fine. But my problem is the 3-4 does seem to leave you light up front, and I'd much rather go back to a 4-3.
There's going to be a lot of moves that we're watching along with the changes to the defense. One of those changes could be Bobby Wagner, depending on which way he decides to go. A week ago, it sounded like he was planning on playing next season. Rick Edgar coming in via chat saying Bobby Wagner press conference sounds like a guy not playing for the Seahawks next year. I don't know how much you could necessarily read into it, especially after a game where your team has the opportunity to make the playoffs, and then you get the win, but you miss the playoffs. So it's kind of in that weird limbo period of how are players supposed to react after the game. And without hearing it, Rick maybe Bobby said something that obviously sounds like he could not be playing with the team next year. But I have who knows? We'll just have to see what Bobby ultimately, and sometimes these guys don't even decide until later.
It's true. And it's a really sticky one, right? Because we did see that Bobby still had his struggles in coverage, and it was something that was exploited time in and time out. But then we see him lead the league in tackles in the run defense too, and be the only guy on the team who was a plus tackler throughout the entire year. And for a legend like Bobby Wagner, I kind of give him the grace to make whatever decision he likes. Like if I'm John Schneider and Bobby comes in and says, I'm going to come back next year and I'm going to play. Okay, let's get a deal done and we'll do it this year. And we'll do that until you don't want to. But I think he gets the right with his play and everything he's meant to Seattle to make that decision on his own. Now, if he does want to move on, it does highlight how much more we have to spend draft capital and our resources this offseason on the front seven. And that includes the linebackers, which is a spot that I missed this last offseason. I did not talk about linebacking enough, and the lack of speed in our linebacking core as a whole really did hurt us.
Well, it's one of those areas that you feel like shouldn't be that, because you look at some of these other teams and other defenses, and it's not like they spend a ton of money at linebackers. They just have guys who can play solidly at that position. I don't feel like you need to be San Francisco and have Drake Greenlaw and Fred Warner in the middle of your defense to have a successful defense. I mean, look at LA, and they have got no names at linebacker, but year after year, they find ways to succeed despite not having these huge talents at middle linebacker. Scott Campbell Photography coming in. Hey, boys, what a win by the Hawks. Pete's not going anywhere. Hurt will be gone, though. And maybe Waldron, bring on the 2024-25 season.
I think overall Waldron figured it out about, what would it have been? About the Dallas game, and started running the ball more on first down. And that really did change the offense's trajectory from having those extended periods of drought. That's one thing that we saw even in this Cardinals game. You didn't go 4 or 5 drives in a row without a score. You went maybe 2. And that's a little bit more of a normal order of operations of football as compared to what we were seeing earlier in the year. It also helped when you start running early and often to get in front of the chains, have more third and manageables, make it easier on Geno. Not that he needs you to make it easier on him, because you put him in all the difficult situations and he shines.
Rick coming back saying Bobby told reporters, in case I don't see at the end of the press, or again at the end of the press conference. And that makes sense. Seattle allowed him to move on once before, and he could be foreseeing that in this offseason too. So it might be one of those situations that, if Bobby doesn't want to play here, or if this is the only place that he wants to play, and yet the Seahawks don't bring him back next year, then it could end up being a forced retirement, I suppose. But he's one of those guys that, gosh, it's tough. I know there's a sentimentality that goes along with a player that's a future first ballot Hall of Famer, but there's also the opportunity to get better and improve but I see so many other places on this team that, yes, that they could improve and still be okay with the future Hall of Famer like Bobby Wagner lining up at linebacker.
Sure. And it's not just sentimentality why I say give him the opportunity to do whatever he wants. He's freaking earned it. Like, that's not a, I just like the guy, so give him another chance. He's earned it. And it's much how I feel about Pete as well. Like, I think he's earned the chance to see this rebuild all the way through next year. Like, because I think at that point, then we kind of know. And some people are ready to cut bait now. That's fine. All we're disagreeing about is the timing. And I don't think that's a huge deal. But at the end of the day, this 14-year stretch has been the winningest stretch of Seahawks football ever.
Yeah.
I mean, it just has.
Sure.
I mean, so, are you ready to just jettison that like right now? A lot of people are.
Holy hand grenade coming in. Does Brandon still have faith in Pete? And so I feel like we've got that answer from Adam, so that might be why it's directed at me.
Wait. Somebody's trying to kick you off the fence, Brandon. How you get?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a great on the fence style answer.
Oh, I have no doubts. I can't wait for these mental gymnastics. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. There are areas that I have faith in Pete, and there are areas that I don't. And the area that I don't have faith in Pete is unfortunately a decision that he's probably going to have to make this offseason, and it is with defensive coordinator. I don't think that Clint Hurtt should come back next year, and I don't have faith that Pete Carroll is going to make the choice in hiring the new defensive coordinator that I think would be best for the team. And I think that the right choice at hiring defensive coordinator would be to go out to get an established guy that has head coaching experience that might challenge Pete a little bit, because I think some of that internal conflict between Pete and a defensive coordinator that also knows what he's doing could be best to help challenge the team. I don't have faith that Pete Carroll's going to do that.
I couldn't be more on board with you on this one. You're 100% correct, and I think that creative tension, that's what Bill Walsh would call it, is a good thing. It helps with the always compete stuff, and maybe bring some fresh ideas to what they're doing there. I like Clint Hurt, the person, a ton. At least the public persona. Obviously, I don't know the man, but it's really hard to call for people's jobs. But in this case, I mean, it is a results business, and the results are what they are.
Holy hand grenade. Did you see the tweets about Jody going to the college championship to maybe look at a replacement for Pete? Do you think it's that, or do you think it's maybe that the hometown Huskies are in the college championship? Maybe a little bit of both.
Maybe a little column A, a little column B. Two things can be true at once. But again, we have to look at Jody Allen's timeline, and she does need to sell in the next couple of years. I mean, I've seen reports all over the map of exactly what that looks like. But wouldn't you rather sell when Pete and John are leaving, you're tearing it down, and new ownership group can come in and just do whatever it is that they want, blank slate? I think it makes it a more appealing purchase, and you probably make some more money if you're Jody Allen.
And we've got people pointing out that was the bread account that's getting everybody all worked up. So yeah, there's
the bread.
Got to watch out. If it's a tweet from Baker Breadman out on Twitter, then that is not an actual report. Baker Breadman, a parody account, not a real account. And there you go.
There you go. There you go.
Brian Smith saying too many missed drafts. Pete will hire Staley as DC to try and compete with the Rams. It won't work. There you go. Predictions already from Brian.
Well, all right. So this is interesting. And I've heard some people talk about this throughout comments and things like that over the last few weeks. And, Pete's defense has been failing for years, and it's been 8 years that it's been terrible. It's like, okay, let's look at that first and foremost. So you have the Russell Wilson LOB era. So that's one era of the Pete Carroll coaching time. And then you have the build around Russ and try to make that work and hold on to some of the end of the prime of the LOB. And then they kind of clean house, and then they have this reset here. So to me, it's 3 different versions of the defense. So I would say the first version was successful. The second was a failure. And this third one so far has been a failure. But again, it's a process to get there. They couldn't just change the entire defense overnight. Even though they made a lot of changes, you can only make so many.
Well, and I think I pushed back on the idea too that this has been Pete's defense the entire time. And I mean, in the way that Pete is the head coach and that they play defense under him, but it's not like the defense hasn't changed drastically in the style and types of things that they do. When they had the Legion of Boom, it was easy because they had so many great players. You could just go out there and the guys could essentially they played great.
Line up and cover 3 and beat us, right?
It doesn't take a whole lot of work to call defense when you have great players and Hall of Famers at so many different positions. It gets a little bit more challenging then when you have to adjust and when you don't have the talent at all the positions. And you do have to do some things differently. And we've seen them try and work that, right? They brought in Jamal Adams. They tried to play more nickel, more dime even at certain points. Mm-hmm. And that was, you never saw the Seahawks play dime back when it was the Legion of Boom defense because they didn't need to. So you do see it change in the types of things that they do on the defensive side of the ball.
Right. And I think one of the things that they were hoping for was that Jamal could come back and be like a former version of himself earlier in his career. And unfortunately, his body just betrayed him. I'm not mad at Jamal Adams for the way that it all worked out. I don't think that any of us can question how much effort he has put into trying to be on the field and be the best player that he can be. But at some point, some players, your bodies just betray you, like Brandon Roy for the Trailblazers a number of years back. Heck of a player, and his knees just said no. And that's kind of where it ended up with Jamal Adams, and is a bummer. And because he wasn't able to do that, it really did affect the run defense, I think, even more than we realized going in.
Noof guy saying big scar from the Adams tray, and it was a move that had a big impact because you gave up multiple first round picks. It didn't work out. I mean, it felt like it had that opportunity to work out when he ended up breaking the sack record by a defensive back, but then injuries not able to allow him to be on the field as much as you'd hope. And yeah, his body gave out on him. And if that sounds like Homer flu, Noof guy, then I guess that's where we're at.
Okay. I would ask Noof guy one question. After last year, when we all thought they were going to win 3 games and we lost our franchise quarterback and all that stuff, did you come away at the end of that season going, oh my gosh, that was actually a pretty darn good job by Pete? I'd be surprised if the answer is no. I'd be surprised if the answer is no. If it is no, and you're being consistent, I applaud it. But most people aren't. And what they did is that they were excited after last year, and then when this year finishes the same way, now it's fire Pete again. And are we mad at Pete, or are we really just mad about our expectations not being met? Last year we had no expectations. He exceeds them. We're all happy. This year we expect a little bit more. Doesn't happen. Now let's get rid of him. So really, it's more, he's a victim right now of our expectations more so than anything. And that's interesting to me because, man, again, give it a 3-year period here, man. That's my argument. And if you feel differently, it's fine.
Well, and I think that this,
and I just broke this down for a Noof guy, man. I just broke this down for you.
I know, but I think the people who may, and if you were being consistent after last year because the defense was so terrible, and you're saying, man, this defense isn't getting better after last year, maybe it was time to make the move. And again, you have another terrible season where you have the opportunity for the defense to improve and it still doesn't, then I can see that as a potential reason or where you would be consistent of moving on. The Homer part of this is, though, it's not in what the Seahawks and the team should do. It's what recognizing reality and what will happen. And it's not like, you broke it down from the financial perspective. That's what owners care a lot about, is the money side of it. And Pete Carroll, obviously, unless people stop showing up to the games because Pete Carroll's the coach and yet he's given the team a chance to win, that's when owners could start to care. We've got Sam Somerville in with a $5 super chat. I'm sad to see this quote unquote win. We'll keep Pete for another win now season, putting the franchise back. Love the man, but need to start in a new direction.
Interesting. And I know there's a lot of people that have that sentiment, Sam. I do. One of the things that I find interesting about that is the idea that this was a win now season. I never thought they were winning the Super Bowl this year. Like, they tore everything down to the studs last year and have kept us in contention. Like, I don't understand how there's no credit for that. And it seems like some folks, every single season, it's either a Super Bowl or it's a bust. And you're totally entitled to have that mindset. That's fine. But you're going to have a very miserable fandom because Super Bowls only come once in a blue moon. Even the greatest, basically the only one to bring Super Bowls on the regular to a fan base, like on the regular, was Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. That's it.
Right. Yeah. And having that as your expectation every year, it will set you up for disappointment almost each and every year. So Samuel Gilbert, are we wrong to think of Pete as a defensive coach? I think this is a good point, Samuel. Rather than a guy who tries to get the best out of everyone. Last year, the offense exceeded expectations, defense still subpar. And I think that, and I noticed this in myself too. I think of Pete as a defensive coach because that's his background. And so I have those expectations that even as head coach, like what he does will filter to the defense, not even recognizing that there is a person there that is coordinating the defense every year. It's probably that idea of trying to simplify everything within an organization that, yeah, Pete's a defensive guy. He should just automatically be able to impart all of his wisdom onto the defensive coordinator, and that they should just be able to carry out all of the knowledge and expertise that Pete has. And so if the defense is a failure, it does reflect on Pete. And in some ways it does, but in other ways, probably it shouldn't.
Yes, there's always the phrase, well, the buck stops at the top and all of that. And there's absolute truth in that, no doubt about it. And I think Pete does take accountability for that in many ways on the podium and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, his leadership style is just like what we said there, or what was said there by the comment. Was it Sam's comment? That he tries to get the best out of everybody. He tries to enable his players and his staff to be the best versions of themselves and let them do their jobs. And I think with Clint Hurts here, I doubt Pete's been in there really doing a ton of tinkering. I think he's looked at him and been like, that ain't right. Here's 2 suggestions, but you better figure it out and put it on him and let him sink or swim and let him prove himself as a coach and see if he can progress his career. And I think that's the right way to lead. Now, with that, couple bad years on defense that while having some personnel deficiencies, there's some things that are inexcusable as well. And I do think that falls on Hurt.
JR coming in with a $10 super chat. I'll listen to this later because it's too loud where I'm here in Phoenix, but wanted to make sure I popped in and said, thanks for another year, gents. KC Hawk, big thanks to KC Hockey. Down attending the game, and yeah, kind of fun to be there at the final game of the season too. And appreciate KC Hawk. And yeah, glad you were able to make it to the game down there. We heard you. We heard the 12s coming through the TV copy.
Oh, man. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was Lumen South right there at the Field of Horrors there. I thought we were going to lose Darrell Taylor to a season-ending injury right there. Not that I particularly want to bring him back. Brooks, he gets hurt earlier in the game or re-aggravates the ankle. And Brooks is an interesting conversation going forward as well. I believe he's up to be re-signed. Do you re-sign Jordan Brooks, Brandon? It's a lot of money.
It comes down to a question of cost. And I think that based on watching other teams have success, that generally paying high amounts at the linebacker spot ends up working out and it ends up not working out for your defense. I think you want to consolidate more of that money on the defensive line and at the pass rusher spots, and not so much at the corners. And I think that at safety, it's shown that has come back to bite them a little bit too, probably paying too much at the safety spots. So I think that
if you'd have gotten the level of play that you paid for, then it wouldn't have been a whiff, because I do think safeties are incredibly important.
Oh, sure.
But especially on the Adams side of things, his body just said no.
No, it's a cost benefit, and we'll look at the salaries of guys going into next year. Quandre Diggs at what, like 20 something plus million next year.
That's gonna have to be restructured.
Yeah, I think that it was set up in that way, because that to me seems off, especially when you compare it to safety play throughout the rest of the NFL. So Snail coming in with a $5 super chat. It's Seattle. Most people here hate Pete because he's optimistic. They're just miserable people. Hate people who aren't miserable all at the same time like them. I don't know.
Is it just the gray? Is that where he's getting at? Is that what's happening there?
I don't know. But I know, just based on me, and maybe it had to do with him coaching at USC. To me, it seemed fake initially, that Pete Carroll's personality, like there's no way a dude could be like that all the time and be like true to himself. And so I think that goes into part of it too. And I think even sometimes when you and I get called homers at him, I think it's because we enjoy football and we like this team. And so we talk it away like this is fun. Like, even though that we're not going to the playoffs, like we had fun watching football and enjoying the season, and we want to continue to have fun. And so it's part of our personality and the way that we talk about the game that makes us sound more homerish.
Sure, I can understand that. And let's not get twisted. This is a podcast for fans by fans. Like, we're fanatics. Like, that's part of it. Of course, we're going to be homers, and I wear that unabashedly. Like, I don't care. I don't care at all. And yeah, Pete Carroll's optimism. I'll tell you what, when he was hired, I was so mad. And this is far before the pod. What was it, 2-3 seasons before we started doing the pod? Like, oh, here comes rah Pete. Can't stand this crap. Like, this isn't going to work at all. He hadn't had a lot of success in the NFL before that. So, I mean, he was a head coach, but they weren't the most successful rep.
Got Samuel Gilbert coming in with the 666 super chat. See, Sam, you got it in regardless. One more thing, Catfish, Glendale, Arizona. They only moved the headstones. They left the bodies. And what was the game to where they rolled out like all of the injuries that have happened to the Seahawks over the season? Like, Why do we have to do that? Why is this something that has to be a topic of conversation on a national broadcast?
This that little package, that little video package was literally entitled The House of Horrors for Seattle. And it was like, no, please no. Like, I didn't need that PTSD in the moment there. I was too busy trying to enjoy a dub.
Yeah, it's a bunch of nonsense. So let's see. Let's look at some of the stats. I haven't pulled up the stats yet from today, and let's see who some of the top performers are for the Seahawks. We talked about a few of them. I was a little bit surprised when I saw in the box score, Geno Smith, just 189 yards on the day, but they did get backed up quite a bit and weren't able to dig out of those holes on offense on several occasions. Ken Walker, 1778, average 4.6 yards per carry. Not bad. And they ran the ball with Zach Charbonnet, so that was nice.
That was nice, and they ran it often, and Kenneth Walker was on fire, man. Like, that's full-blown, good canine right there. And I think that's the reason why you end up with 28 attempts for Geno, because you actually rely on the run game. And I think that's probably the way to go about it. I think that is winning football. It's the way winning football has been since football has been football. Like, so I'm not mad at it. Geno, I thought, had a very nice game, moved around the pocket. He did miss a couple passes while moving around a little bit.
Yeah,
but overall,
I think about especially the one on the sideline to DK, where I think that they just weren't in sync of what they were trying to do, because I think Geno saw that DK had all kinds of space upfield, and so he was trying to throw the ball upfield. DK just kind of sitting down at the sideline, trying to, I think, get the first down, and not being on the same page in that moment led to that pass being dropped. DK had another.
And he threw too damn hard. Yeah, like just lollipop it out there, and he's wide open.
He had good 10, 15 yards all around him.
Yeah, for sure. And then the DK catch that was overturned. I mean, that's a catch. That's a catch.
Yeah.
Like, I did not see any conclusive evidence to overturn the call on the field, which is what I told is how the review process works. But, maybe I don't know.
Had his hands underneath the ball. When he rolled over, the ball moved, but he still had it secured. So
yeah,
maybe the interpretation is just how much the ball can move for it counts as not having control. I don't know. It seemed like if it was a call on the field, it should stay a call, but ultimately I suppose it didn't matter. But Tyler Lockett on the day, 71 yards. And nice to see Will Dissly have a decent day. He had the touchdown catch, had the 46 yards. We needed it because Noah Fant was sidelined due to injury for the most part.
Due to injury, maybe the last time we see Noah Fant in a Seahawks uniform as well. His contract is up, and if I'm Noah Fant, I'm not lying. I'm looking to go somewhere else, because he's a pass-catching tight end, and the Seahawks never have and probably never will feature that position in that way as long as Pete Carroll's the coach.
Well, and he's not the only one. You got Will Dissly, he could be cut or restructured. He could not be back next year, or does his contract end? With the tight ends, I feel like all of the tight ends are kind of have question marks around them, because Parkinson, I think, is coming to the end of his contract. So that's going to be tough if you end up losing that many positions.
Oh, all three dudes at one position? You bet. Yeah. That would be a difficult thing to replace, but again, there's a big long off season to get into all that. That's for sure.
I like the pass catching tight ends. I'm with Lisa.
I like them too. We just don't use them.
Right. Yeah. So may as well just get more blocking tight ends, which end up being the cheaper types of guys. So looking over on the defensive side, Devin Witherspoon, 7 tackles on the day, and he tackled the heck out of some guys today. Wish we could clone him. Devin Bush, look at him coming up next with 5 tackles. Look at Bobby Wagner, 11 assisted tackles for solo. Bobby all over the place.
Bobby all over the place. I wouldn't mind seeing an upgrade from Devin Bush next year. A kind of a stopgap guy. He was fine.
He could be depth.
Fine.
Yeah.
He'd have to be third string depth for me.
We got Patrick O'Connell. Maybe he starts to improve this offseason too.
The Cali kid from Kalispell? Yeah.
Exactly. So time for him to put in the work this offseason and find himself, work his way into a starting linebacker job. See the challenge.
Well, I think Nick Ballore was actually our highest rated linebacker according to PFF. So maybe we just need to try him out there more.
I don't think that would carry over necessarily.
No, no.
No, I think the PFF score may go down if he were to carry that over
What?
a full season. I
Nah,
know
they're
it's just
perfect
a
with
theory.
those. Yeah, they're perfect with those scores.
Kyler Murray, 262 yards on the day with the touchdown. James Conner, holy smokes! I mean, we knew it was going to be tough, and we got exactly what we expected coming into this game.
Right, and I heard one other podcast somewhere or show earlier this week talking about the game against the Steelers and characterizing the defensive line's play in that game and being like, it wasn't like they were getting pushed 3-4 yards back off the ball. It's more like they're playing with the wrong leverage in certain spots. And we heard Pete talk about that in the coaches show. We heard Clint Hurt talk about it. And that's one of the reasons why I don't put absolutely everything on coaching. Is this season is the probably more so than any other season have I heard any of the Seahawks coaching staff talk about execution by the players more so than I have the coaches talking about the defensive players, especially up front this year.
Yeah, and that it does, because we talk about it all the time, that it can't just be coaching, it can't just be the players, it's a balance of the two. And so you try and you look for those areas of where it doesn't match up. And I think of a guy like Darrell Taylor, where you would see that, and pointing to that as saying that's a guy who doesn't seem to be able to defend the run very well. Derek Hall has been kind of a disaster in the run game this year too. Hopefully, with that though, a young player who can improve. I've kind of lost that similar type of hope that a guy like Darrell Taylor can improve, and I think he's coming to the end of his contract too. So hopefully, another team pays him high as a pass rusher, and then we get one of those comp picks that you get from those high price contracts when they go elsewhere.
That would be great. I would love to be the beneficiary of some comp picks for a change. That'd be neat.
It's been a little bit. It's been a little bit, but that all comes down to not really having any needs when it comes to free agency, and we've seen kind of year after year lately that they have needs in free agency that they should address and need to address when that time frame comes around. And if you're doing that to an extent, and you're not going to get a whole lot of comp picks.
Probably not. And really, of all the things that the Seahawks have done over the last few years, it's been the free agent part that's been the most hit and miss. I mean, the draft of the last couple of years, I remember Noof Dog pointing to bad drafts, and okay, sure, if you want to still point to 18 and 19, cool. Yeah, those were bad drafts. I can't remember which one of those years was a bad draft for everybody. But I mean, John has had two very good drafts these last 2 years, nationally speaking, how everybody views it and things like that. I am super dubious of last year's draft for what it meant for this year's team. Yeah. Now, last year's draft, depending on what they do this year, then if it all pairs together, now it looks like genius again. So,
but it still would be hard to point back at the 23 draft as a failure in the way that we tend to judge drafts, because you look at both first round picks and you'd say, well, hey, you got a guy who's a Pro Bowler on the defensive side in Devin Witherspoon, and you got a guy who ended up being runner up in terms of rookie receptions. And so how could you look at that as a failure? But it's then when you look at it in terms of who could you have had and what it means for the identity of the team. It's like the Jimmy Graham trade, right? Because you look back at that and you say, oh man, you had this, at the time it seemed awesome because you were getting an all-pro wide receiving tight end, and you're looking at, hey, this is an upgrade that the offense can use. But then when you take a step back and you look at it historically now, it's kind of one of those decisions in a long line of decisions of, are you choosing to be tough or are you choosing to be soft? And if you look at it through that lens in the Jimmy Graham, Max Unger trade, it's a choice to go to the softer side.
Yeah, I love the way that you put that, because some people would view that as like Jimmy just not being a blocker and being a pass catcher and therefore soft. But you're 100% right, linking it to the Max Unger part of it, that trading an all-time center for a pass catcher, it shows you where your priorities were at that moment. Now, I mean, it did feel like in the moment Jimmy Graham was going to be a big upgrade over Zach Miller and McCoy and those guys at that point. But
And Max had injuries, and you're wanting to get weapons for your franchise quarterback. So, you can make sense of it, but when it just, like I'm saying, it depends on the lens that you view it through.
Yeah, and then you mentioned, well, you can't be real mad about the first round picks this last year in 23, and I agree with you on Spoon 100%. Didn't have a problem with it at the time, still don't have a problem with it. It proved that they've got, a fantastic football player. Is going to be a perennial Pro Bowler, if not more. The JSN pick, man, I mean, you're like, oh, he's second in the league in rookie receptions. Well, cool. When you catch 10 dozen bubbles, I'm sure that you're going to do that and, gain 5 or 6 yards per. I freaking hate bubbles. You talk about playing soft football. Bubbles are soft football. Can't stand that. And at the end of the day, I mean, he produced the same amount of touchdowns as Marquise Goodwin did the year before. And he was responsible for maybe one win, the Eagles catch, remarkable catch, happy for the win, appreciate it, all that stuff. But I can guarantee you, if they had drafted a couple DTs high there, that they would have equated to more than one win.
And you can look back on it too and say, hey, one of our guys that we talked about in that spot was Mozzie Smith, went to the Cowboys. I hear a lot of Cowboys fans complaining about how terrible he is against the run too. So, in some ways, it's more viewing it through the mentality part of the lens. But yeah,
I mean, there's a bunch of dudes that got taken, in the second and third rounds. It didn't have to be Mozzie Smith. Like, that's what people do. They're like, well, if you did that, then you just end up with Mozzie Smith and you'd stink. Well, we don't know that would have been the choice, and you could have chosen one of the different ones.
We've got Clinton coming in saying Tyler has a $27 million cap hit next year. True. So the JSN story is yet to be fully told.
I knew that would ruffle Clinton. I knew that would ruffle Clinton. And look, I'm talking about just this year. It could very well be that JSN over the next 2, 3, 4 years, it becomes as valuable, say, like Tyler Lockett.
Yeah. And supposed to be Tyler's replacement. Well, that's
fine. I'm not ready to rush Tyler out the door. I'd rather rush some of the crap ass defenders in our front seven out the door and get guys in there.
Yeah. And with the contract number, that might be another planned restructure too. The way that they tend to inflate some of these salaries so they can get to the offseason and say, hey, you'll get your money, but it'll be over X amount of time and we'll spread it out. And, you'll get, there's salary cap magic that is performed every single year. It feels like that might be the case both with Tyler Lockett and Quandre Diggs, both solid players still, and worth keeping around in terms of their play.
Tyler had a great season. Yeah. The only reason his numbers aren't as high as they had been in the past is that we were so intent on working JSN into the mix and take away his targets. Like, that's not a Tyler problem. When I look at Diggs, I see him going from being like one of the better safeties in the league to closer to average. And That's not saying he's trash, nothing like that. Just
it's okay for a guy to be okay. He doesn't have to be great or trash.
Yeah, I mean, guys can be in the middle, which is usually where people are.
JSN is overhyped because he played at OSU, but should blossom into Lockett at a minimum. And we've got Carly saying, if they cut Lockett, I'm leading the Fire Pete train.
Fair. Look, and if they come back this next offseason and they don't make a extremely earnest effort in draft capital in free agent money into the defensive line and linebacking position, then I will be first in line on the get these guys out of here train.
I can see, and JSN, one of those guys too, that we've, he seems like a great dude. So a guy that you can root for, and everybody in the Seahawks receiving room. Gosh, what a great group of guys. I mean, you got DK, great dude. You got JSN, seems like a great dude. Tyler, we know is a great dude because we have the history with him and know. And we've got Jake Bobo. So 4 solid dudes in the wide receiver room that we can all and should all expect to be back next year.
We're good on the perimeter. We're good at running back. We'll figure out something at tight end. My biggest concern offensively this offseason, Brandon, is Abe Lucas's old knee. That has me so terrified that we could lose the best player possibly from that draft.
Right.
Because his knee just couldn't hold up. And they were interviewing him, and he said something along the lines of like, kind of looked over. He's like, "Can I talk about that? Can I tell you what we're gonna do? Like, I don't know." And it sounded like he's gonna go see the witch doctor in Germany, like
Right.
Kobe did years back, and get the platelet thing in his knees or something like that. Maybe go to Mexico and get some stem cells, like guys do down there. Something, man. But we need Abe Lucas. His physicality is a big time difference maker for this offense.
Well, and that could be one of those areas too, to where you can hedge a little bit in the draft and go out and draft a guy who plays right tackle, but also could bump into guard. And then that way, depending on how you work it, does Lucas end up being a better guard and could maybe protect his knee a little bit more if he is playing in the interior versus out on the edge? I tend to think that as good as he is at right tackle, he would also be good at playing right guard. And
Yes.
you just build, because I don't know if Phil Haynes is the answer. I don't know if Bradford's the answer.
He's got a long ways to go to become the answer.
You got Damian Lewis, who could be up for a contract this offseason. That's going to be another one to watch to see
Sign him.
which way the Seahawks
Sign him now
go.
and do it faster. Dame Lewis is not the problem. It was Evan Brown a 1 year or a 2 year deal. I want to say it was a 2 year deal.
I want to say 2 year deal on Evan Brown. Yeah.
Right. But even if it was a 1 year deal, what we saw to Olu throughout the year, I thought was encouraging, and you could go that way too and be just fine, I think. But you're right. Right guard, man, that needs to be addressed in a big way.
Yeah, 1 year deal for and I don't know if what we saw from Evan Brown is going to be something that teams are then going to, he's going to be looking for a big bump in the offseason due to his play in Seattle. So, maybe he's a guy that you can get under contract for relatively cheap, and he ends up being depth.
I think,
who knows?
I think he made himself some money this year. I thought Evan Brown had an excellent season. He was good.
Yeah, he'd be $2.5 million guy, but I don't know if he's the difference maker that people look at and say, we got to go out and pay him $8 million. But if the Seahawks were to say pay him $5 million to keep him around, or a 2 year deal, and have that flexibility that he can play either guard or center, that makes some sense.
That makes some sense.
The truth, as I know it, Pete has never put together a good offensive line.
It's
he doesn't know what he's doing.
It's not true. It's just been a really long time. Because Max Unger, Breno, Okung, who were the guards at that time?
That offensive line that
was a good offensive
for the
line.
Super Bowl team, that was a good offensive line.
Yeah.
So, and they haven't had a whole lot of success at offensive line coordinators either. And I feel like with Andy Dickerson, it did slide a little bit, but that could be with a lot of injuries this year, a lot of injuries on the offensive line.
I was going to say, I don't know that we've had a better performance from an O-line coach in the last 4 years, especially when you throw in the injury factors within there. I think that's a big deal.
Like, we saw Stone Forsythe, who played relatively okay at times, and a dude who's a 6th round pick and has played like 6th round pick at times. So I think that when you look at coaching, you look at that and you say, that they got as much out of a guy like Stone Forsythe as possible.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, short of it just getting lucky and having being like a Pro Bowler or something, but a contributor, you bet. No doubt about it.
Well, a big thanks to everybody for hanging in there throughout the season, coming in and hanging out with us on this final game day episode of the year. Yes, the Seahawks, they get to close the season with a win. It's not something that we get to do a whole lot of, but they close with the win. They get the 9-7 winning season.
And a winning record, Brandon. We are not losers.
9-8 winning record, right?
It's a winning record.
9-7. Yeah, no, I
Did I say 9-7? Oh,
I said 9-7, and it's a habit that I'll probably be in for a long, long time.
Oh my gosh, the extra game screws up my math every time I start talking about records. I can't figure it out. It's like time zones to me. I just have a learning disability.
Matthew Crawford asking, are you guys taking vacation now? I don't know about vacation, Matthew. There's still stuff to talk about throughout this year. Now, it'll feel like vacation because we'll be doing less shows. We'll have we won't have 3 in 3 out to do every week because there won't be games to dig into the nooks and crannies. There won't be a betting show every week because there's no props to bet on in the off season, unless, you guys want to do it through the playoffs. That might be something.
I'm good. I think we should end the season right here with my victory. for the entire year. But if they want to do it for the rest of the offseason just to celebrate my win for the whole offseason, I'm in. Yeah, that'd be fun.
That makes a lot of sense. So we will be back. We will be talking Seahawks football throughout the offseason. And I think with that, Adam,
there's actually 2 things left to say.
Oh.
Thank all you guys. Love you all so much. Man, you guys are amazing. And go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
I'm working on it, Barry.